So I decided to start doing something. I decided to start doing a lot of things, actually. But one of those some things is making more of these kinds of videos to, to get vulnerable, because I had to silence my phone. Now I'm back. So this idea of vulnerability is something that I've been chasing for a long time. Once I really started to understand like the power in becoming vulnerable and being vulnerable and then sharing that vulnerability. And I think that there's an addendum to this, proclamation of be vulnerable, because through being vulnerable about some shit, you are healing it and coming to terms with it, I think, in a lot of ways. So I think that the addendum to that is once it starts not feeling uncomfortable, you got to find something else to be vulnerable about. Because you can get stuck in your vulnerability and it can sort of become an identity. Because you're like, look how badass I'm wielding this thing that was once really hard for me to talk about. And then you sort of like rest on your laurels in a sense. And when I say you, I mean me. I'm talking from my own experience, but I think this is just part of the human condition. So the idea of becoming vulnerable in relationships, in your art, in your expression, in just about anything that you do, I think it comes with the addendum of once it starts to feel good, or once it starts to heal, whatever that's such a kind of a weird word, but like whenever it starts to heal, find something else to get vulnerable about and continue that chain, where I think you should always be in a certain level of discomfort with your expression until you reach enlightenment, whatever that means. So this idea of being vulnerable, the kind of stuff that I want to talk about in this video is the kind of stuff that like makes me feel uncomfortable. And I realize for all my decades of running around shouting from stages, vulnerability, there's still a lot that I'm protecting. And I don't think that I think it's outdated. I think that security system's outdated. And I don't think it necessarily needs protection. So I was thinking, like, how could I become more vulnerable and really put my money where my mouth is, do what I'm suggesting other people do? And I thought it would be talking about my relationship with food. Now, as I say that, I feel disgusting. In my belly, in my chest, and my hands are shaky. Like I don't want to talk about that because it's really vulnerable and I haven't healed. I've healed some of it, but there's still lots of fucked up shit around my relationship with food that is keeping me from being a fully realized being and really leaning into my purpose in this world. So the idea of being vulnerable, and I was talking with someone earlier, and I had some experience recently, and I was talking to them about it, and they were like, other people probably need to know about this kind of thing. And I was like, yeah, but I don't want to make these kinds of videos to be like, look how fucking great I am. I want to make them for the same reason that I write poetry, for the same reason that I stand on stage, to sort of be like, hey, look what I found. This might be helpful. So, I've been struggling with my relationship with food my entire life. And I've spent most of the last 2 decades really trying to understand it. You know, I love data, so I have decades of journal entries and metrics and weights and food and this and that. And I love knowledge, and I have tons of whatever the cutting edge of science is for nutrition and for how we intake food and for what foods to eat and all of that stuff. You know, it's wild. I was on the train in the 90s when everything was fat free, you know, and then we were all just consuming all of this sugar and wheat, but it didn't have fat. We figured like, oh, no fat, it won't be fat, you know, that's what we fucking were taught. Because the sugar industry took a big fucking payout, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. So I've always been really interested in collecting this data and like learning, but I've been like really poor at applying it. And I like to make sense out of things, and I like to find meaning in things. And I found a lot of meaning behind my relationship with food. I found a lot of meaning behind how I use food, how I dissociate with food. And there's a lot of times that I'm like, I wish it was heroin. I wish it was Coke. I wish it was alcohol. Because in my brain, those things are sexier than food. And I don't want to disrespect any addict that's struggling, because any addiction is fucking miserable. But food doesn't really get swept into that edgy world of, you know, illicit drugs, because it's food. But the compulsions and the dissociative behavior and the devastating effect on your relationship with others, your relationship with your body, your relationship with money, your ability to think clearly, to sleep well, to take care of yourself, to prioritize the important shit, all of that is corrupted by a food addiction the same way it's corrupted by, all those things are corrupted by alcoholism and any other addiction. So I want to share something, because I suspect that there's probably other people out there that think, again, food addiction, not really a sexy thing. It's the thing that people are most prone to say, not an addiction, just fucking stop eating. You know what I mean? And those people usually have their own, whatever they're popping Xanax every 2 hours. Just stop eating. It's not that easy, the way just not drinking is not that easy. And a food addiction requires a complete overhaul of your relationship with the substance. Abstinence isn't really an option. FA, Food Addicts Anonymous, they call wheat and sugar, staying away from that, as abstaining. And it makes a lot of sense, because those are at the center. And you'll feel a lot better if you abstain from wheat and sugar, but it's ultimately a rewiring of your relationship with food that has to happen. You can't just not eat. Although fasting has been one of the most effective and amazing tools in learning a new relationship with food. Because when you fast, you can really see how little food we actually need, right? But I'm going to try to keep this focused because this is not a fasting talk, and this is not even, I guess it is more of an addiction thought. Roll with me here as this kind of stuff comes up, and I promise to try to make it all make sense. So the thing that I want to share with you is that last week, for the first time in my life, I did an intentional psychedelic mushroom sit. What I mean by intentional is like it was guided, and there was an intention, and there was an opening prayer, and there was a closing prayer. And it was the most profound experience of my life. I don't think that that's hyperbole to say, you know, in this moment, 4 or 5 days removed, the shit that I saw, I had never considered before. And I have a healthy history with psychedelics. In my early days, it was more of a party tool. You know, as I got into my 30s, I understood that they were therapeutic tools, and I used them in ways where it was just me, and I didn't really have the guidance of like doing a real sit. So I never really got this perspective. And I went into it with my intention was to figure out this food thing because it's in the way of so much shit. And I had a flare up earlier this year where I saw how it just fucked everything up. And I was like, I got to do something about this, you know? And this is where I arrived. And you think you ask the mushroom to like fix your relationship with food and it's just going to take your hunger away or something like that, right? Or you're just going to, I don't really know what I expected. Some sort of satiety, right? Oh, suddenly I'm not hungry, or I don't need that, you know? Because I crave, I look at my relationship with substances like coffee, and I have this big tub of coffee, big tub of like family size Cafe Bustelo. And I always marvel when I get to the bottom of it, that lasted just as long as the last one did, because I drink the same amount every day, and I never have a compulsion to drink more of it. It's one of the only substances, food substances in my dwelling that is safe, because it's just, I have a cup of coffee a day. If I'm feeling wild, I might have two. But there isn't this compulsion. I'm not waking up at 2 a.m. to cook up a cup of coffee the way I would countless other ingredients that I can't really keep on hand if I'm having a flare up of this addiction or whatever, because I will just eat until I run out of food. So I asked the mushroom for help, and I didn't really know what it was, I didn't really know what to expect. There was a point early on in this trip where the mushroom took me right to my experience with value in terms of my own self-worth, right? I have a list of like 20 keywords that came out of this trip, and value and worth was like an overarching theme of what it was showing me. If you're uncomfortable with phrases like being shown in relation to a fungus, you're gonna have to get used to it, because it's really what happens. And I don't mean this in some kind of like lofty hippie way. I mean it in like the realest sense of like, I was shown something by a wise old teacher about myself. So if that's hard talk for you, just get over it. Because there'll be more. So, worth. This is hard to say. I've told the story to a few friends so far, but this is hard to say knowing that I'm putting it out there publicly. And that's why I think I was called to be this kind of vulnerable, because it really doesn't feel, I'm having trouble framing it because I want to repackage it in a prettier way. But it's just the honest truth. And I promise whatever we do here will always be the honest truth. The mushroom showed me that at some point in my life, I started to mistake food for my worth. Value. It wasn't in, I don't know where people mostly learn value and worth, at what age that comes in, and what things are usually there, what healthy things are usually there, like integrity, honesty, trust. I didn't learn those rules of worth. So my definition of worth, somehow, and that's a broad, gross overstatement somehow, but for sake of time and my ability to tell a somewhat cohesive story, those two things somehow got crossed. Food and worth. And the mushroom showed me how I was trying to establish my value in moments where I feel worthless with food. Because my barometer for worthiness and value and self-worth is so fucked up, whenever this arises for me, this feeling of not being enough or being too much or not being loved or not being worthy, food is the thing that I'm turning to somehow satisfy this really outdated programming that I taught myself, this imagined fairy tale that this slice of pizza is my worth. Therefore, if this girl dumps me or rejects me and I feel like a piece of shit, food will reestablish my worth. And I know that sounds really basic, but you got to understand, like, for years I've been going like, yeah, when I'm stressed, I eat. But the idea of stress is just a cop-out, because I wasn't looking at underneath what the fuck is stress and what is this feeling of stress. Well, it's a feeling of, in most cases, not all, but in most cases, it's this feeling of being valueless, not being worthy. And so stress eating, which is just a clean way of tidying all that up, and also a way of me going, I got it all figured out, and even though I have it all figured out, I'm not going to do anything about it because I didn't really have it all figured out. And I still don't think any of this means I have it all figured out. It's just a new layer of understanding around my relationship with food, and it's the most profound bit of information around this shit that I've had ever. It's been like 6 weeks since I've eaten fast food. And there's always like a consciousness in my food binging when I'm on a tear. There's always like kind of a consciousness of like eating somewhat healthy stuff, and then like when I really start to not give a shit, like I'm just at the fucking drive-through, you know. And that's when the weight starts coming up quick, and that's when my energy just starts dropping quick, and I just feel like I'm dying. So for 6 weeks I've been off the fast food, and it's been really nice. And the other night, I had a bit of a trigger in a group dynamic where I felt like, again, this is all new information since the mushroom trip. You know, this was 3 days after the trip, where I was in a group dynamic, and I was frustrated because I felt like I was letting the people in my group down. I felt like I was not being enough. And then I also felt like I was at the same time being too much and not being heard, and frustrated with that. And showed up at the Jack in the Box drive-thru to smash 2 breakfasts. I was like, oh, they got breakfast bagels now. There's an excuse. I haven't had those yet. I'm a sucker for breakfast any time of day. And here I found myself for the first time in 6 weeks, eating fast food and making all of these rationalizations of like, it's, you know, it's just one time, and, you know, it's also, you know, it's like eggs, and it's not like terrible, and it's just, you know, all of this. And then the mushroom, you know, it dawned on me, oh, I just left this space where I feel all day long I felt great and worthy of being on this planet. And it didn't have any tugs towards food. And then I left this space where I felt like my value and my worth was in question. And I found myself Pavlovian at the drive-thru, just effortlessly there. Like, how did I get here, you know? And that was my first real glimpse after this trip of like what food is for me in terms of being a definer of my worth, which is like really fucking distorted, man. It's like, damn, I'm really fucked up. And I don't mean that in a fucking I'm so cool, I'm fucked up. I'm like, damn. So now for me, the next step is to like figure out how to, you know, because I also want to preface all that feeling of unworthiness, all that feeling of having no value in that group dynamic. Intellectually, I understand that most of that is imagined. Because if I was to talk to each one of those individuals one by one, me being valueless, I know wouldn't be the case. But I'm making the choice to feel that way, which is something that I'm trying to understand more about, because I have this lack of self-worth at my center, you know? So I'm trying to now build some real deal self-worth that is not imagined the way that food is and the way that self-worthlessness is, but some real deal self-worth and value in myself without ego, or maybe a little bit of ego, because I think it takes ego to get through your day, but that's another topic. But real true self-worth so that I can have these authentic moments of being present and not needing food to fill that void. This is all very new to me, this information, so I'm making sense of it as I'm talking, and this is maybe only the third time I've said it out loud. So it's one of those vulnerabilities that I was talking about in the beginning, because I really want to heal this part of myself. I'm going to be 44 years old in February, and my body can't take this constant. I mean, I gain and lose 100 pounds every couple of years. and it is no longer cute. It's going to kill me. And I don't want to die yet. I would like to do some things. To go back to the original point of discussion at the top of this recording, it feels really yucky to say this shit. So I'm trying to go into that vulnerability and just say it, and then upload it so strangers can fucking hear it and say whatever or feel whatever, and then just hope that somebody also is going through this and gets a little bit of something out of the gift that I was given through this mushroom of worth, because I never thought about that. My worth is food. Wow. I also never, my family never ate fast food as a kid. It was never really part of our in our house. So it was always this like treat. And in some ways, even though it used to be like a very cheap thing, a status. Because the only time I can remember having fast food would be like on road trips or something where we like, maybe we had some extra money to spend on it. So in my mind, this like value, this worth was all coming from like, oh, I got to eat this like fucking chicken sandwich wrapped in a wax paper, like hot from a window, like whole new thing, you know? And it makes sense to me that I would get those wires crossed. And this is not an indictment on my upbringing or either one of my individual parents. I take full responsibility for the person that I am today, and I take full responsibility for getting me to who I want to become. So, you know, as I go back and find this like corrupted programming from childhood, it's never to admonish or finger point my parents, because look, we all just fucking showed up here trying to figure out how this thing works. And I don't think I'm mad. I just want to get better. You know? I showed up here with no sense of value or worth or trust or honesty, and I had to make my own meaning out of that. And some of that shit got me through and kept me alive, and a lot of it is corrupted. But, you know, my father before me, my mother before me, and their father, and their mother, and father, and mother, we all just fucking show up here. And we develop survival tactics, and they get corrupted. Because they usually start off that way. And then they become outdated, and then we become adults with really fucking weird, unhealthy, disastrous behavior, coping mechanisms, you know, behavior patterns. And I think there's some point where I wasn't raised right, or I was just a kid, is no longer a valid excuse. Because we're just going to keep bringing more people into this world that have that excuse. And then what are we doing? So I'm really interested in finding more of these corrupt files and relearning them and redefining things like value, worth, trust. And I'm committed to this work, and I think I'm going to make more videos about it. I guess, you know what? Comment. You know what? Comment, like, private message me if that's a thing we do. And you tell me what you think. You want to see more of this? You want to go on this journey with me? Because I'm going on it regardless. And I've always been afraid to talk about this kind of stuff in this manner because it feels pedantic. I don't want it to say, I don't want it to be, hey, look how fucking great I am. Because I'm not. But I think this is valuable information. And there's a lot of people out there peddling a lot of bullshit. So at the very heart of whatever it is I'm going to do with this information, I'll always be honest. I promise you that. And yeah, man, I'd appreciate it if you wanted to ride with me. So I'm going to pull this into the editing machine. It's like 30 minutes long already. It seems way too long for me. And I think I'll edit out some parts to make it more concise. And then am I going to be one of those guys that says like comment and like and share for more? I don't want to do that. But I really would like for you to comment if you want to see more of this kind of stuff. So, all right, I got to go eat. Peace.